idea that parents do not like having that discussion with their kids.
Yeah.
They're like, I'll let the school handle it or let them do it. I don't want to have that discussion. But compare that to like learning how to drive a car.
Right.
Parents don't have that same approach where it's like, let the school do it.
They'll figure it out.
No, they're like hands-on.
They'll learn from their friends.
This is very important.
Yeah.
This is a big piece of life. This could be dangerous if it's not handled appropriately. So I want to be involved. But then when it comes to sex, it's like, no, somebody else.
It's so
I'm too uncomfortable.
Right. And like what you said about parenting. So I have 2 kids. Mine are very young. I have a 3-year-old and an 8-year-old. But the 8-year-old is, he's a little boy and he's up and coming, right? And he's second grade. But already, I think being a therapist and parenting kids is very different because you're constantly aware. I need to not screw this up.
Yeah.
I have seen so many patients, and especially with sexuality. Like if there's 2 cornerstones of human psychology that I think show up in so many different manifestations of what you called maladaptive behavior. How you were raised, right? Your family of origin, big piece of you, and also sexuality. And we don't talk about it. Even in therapy, I've had men clients, female clients, couples clients that were sitting there working on stuff, and it's like, okay, let's talk about sex. And it's like the air left the room. The quiet, and I'm like, guys, I am literally a therapist. This is probably the safe place, right? We can talk about what you like. And it's like, no, I don't want you. You've been married for 10 years. You don't want them to know what you like? Well, I don't know. They'll judge me. And that gets to what you do.
Oh, that's a whole nother show.
Oh my God.
That is a whole nother show.
Yeah, it is. But sexuality is a cornerstone.
It is a cornerstone.
Psychology.
I mean, when I was in practice, I had, not outing too much, I had a client who had projected his preferences onto me. And in my training, one of the things that I was taught was, as a therapist, you take that and then you examine it. But a lot of therapists are afraid of the projection in and of it. So that, And I just said, okay, that's interesting. Let's have a conversation about your attraction to me.
Call it out.
And it was never a scary thing for me, but it makes a lot of therapists uncomfortable.
Yeah. We did an episode on transference, and I talked about the one client I've ever had, who did any kind of transference on me, and she offered to take me to, London to get married and run away.
Wow.
Yeah, and I was like, maybe Paris. But I'm not going to London. They have hot beer. I draw the line at my culinary stuff.
It's room temperature beer, and it's not that bad.
It is exactly
I'm just
bad.
saying you missed an opportunity.
Yeah. The licensing board is taking notes right now.
Well, you always have the podcast to fall back.
Fall back on the sweet podcasting gig. Do you guys have any internships at the HM? Anything I could just kind of fall back into?
I get asked that a lot by therapists in town.
Just checking.
Good.
Put me on the mailing list, please.
Right.
So let's dive into this orgy.
Let's.
All right, I'm gonna turn off the lights. Hold on.
Love diving into orgies with 2 guys. It sounds great.
Let's talk about the orgy now.
So can you tell us a little bit about the backstory?
I hadn't heard about the orgy. My husband forwarded me a link to their website or some announcement that they had made, and he said, hey, maybe the museum could get involved with this. So I turned it over to our publicist / event coordinator, and I said, hey, maybe we can get a table, we can be a vendor at one of their events, let me know. And she
sponsored the slip and slide.
Yeah.
Brought to you by the EHM.
Brought to you by the EHM. Our special lube. And she called me back and she said they just lost their space.
Yeah, I remember hearing about
it. It happened that day that we contacted them. And
they almost got too much attention. It was too successful.
It was a double-edged sword.
Right.
A double-edged sword for sure. And she says, what do you want to do? And I said, well, offer them the museum.
Wow. Dive right in there.
I dove right in, and I did contact our owner, and he's a pornographer of the last 50 years.
Right.
He's best friends with Larry Flint, and he's just the guy that never went. Like, he never wanted to have a public persona. But he's one of the movers and shakers in the industry. I mean, he's kind of retired now, but
sure.
And he was like, yeah, doc, do whatever you think.
Do whatever
right.
you want.
Yeah,
he wasn't like
we have
sex?
we have a great relationship, and so I said, yeah, let's do it, and we started organizing it and set it all up. We got all the clearances, we had all the attorneys sign off on it.
Oh my goodness!
And then we put out the press release.
Yeah,
and all hell broke loose.
I saw that. Oh my gosh!
Yeah. it was this last week was unlike anything I've experienced at the museum, and we have a lot of crazy stuff happen at the museum, partly because we cause it. But
all these sex nerds and
all these sex nerds, and right. But all of a sudden, I got calls from the city, from law enforcement, from other attorneys. It was just with this descendants upon the museum.
People trying to stop it?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Red tape. Red taping. Red tape.
Hold
on
here.
Yeah.
Well, these are municipal codes, and our attorneys are like, here are the laws.
Right.
Actually, you're wrong. And it was, there was a series of events that happened. And
well, Nick and I were wondering just functionally how it was going to be pulled off, because we've both been to the EHM. I was thinking bubble wrap. There's going to be bubble wrap all over the floor, and they'll just spray it with lube, and just so everybody have fun.
that 2 or 3 weeks beforehand, when we actually had got contracts signed and so forth, it was decided because, and that's when the museum signed on to the study. Right, that I was going to lead, because I actually looked up some of the research, and there's not a lot on orgies and the dynamics of orgies and the attendees of orgies. The most significant studies I found were 1970 and 1983.
Oh, wow.
Right?
Holy cow.
Really, really old.
Yeah.
And so I said, well, let's do something statistical. Let's just start from the basics, because if we're trying to do a qualitative, with that many people, it's just I just won't have the manpower to conduct a qualitative study. So we're just going to do statistical.
And a qualitative study for the listener has a lot more to do with like learning the profile of each person there and getting to know their motivations and interviewing them. Whereas a quantitative study can sort of rely on what you can see and hear and just sort of
demographics, numbers, that kind of
big
thing.
Big picture.
Right. So, one of the reasons why I felt as a clinician that it was qualified to be an orgy at the museum is because it was on one floor in one open space.
I see.
So we were actually going to – the downstairs is now largely political and sex ed, right? So there's not a lot of artifacts that could be harmed by moving things around.
Logistically, you saw a way to make it happen.
Yeah. So we were just going to move everything to the edges. The organizers had gotten drapery to protect what was there, and they had rented a number of beds.
Oh, okay.
And mats and so forth.
Okay.
It's 24,000 square feet. It's big.
Yeah.
And then we were going to do the monitoring from the second floor, because there's an open trellis sort of area or balcony area that looks down into the first floor.
Right.
And so that to me made it more solid than say it was just in a building under one roof with a bunch of rooms, right? Where I couldn't really monitor things.
I see.
So that was that's the logistical side of it.
Wow.
Yeah.
So once you did the press release, it's a nightmare. Everybody's trying to stop you and saying, hey, red tape, municipalities, blah, blah, blah. It's so funny. Las Vegas gets all protective of its image.
Yes.
That's
what I heard the most.
That's where we draw the line, guys?
Yeah.
That's the one? Orgy went too far?
Yep, the orgy went too far. Yeah.
Noted.
Yep.
David Blaine stabbing people on the Fremont Street was fine, but this is where we're drawing the line.
Yeah, and it kept coming back to that we're now a sports town.
Oh, wow.
And I said, well, okay.
Why are you responsible for that?
Right. Yeah. Well,
the Raiders are coming. We have to protect our image.
Right. Yeah.
Come on.
For the Raiders.
Yeah. Right. An orgy would class up Oakland.
Right.
They wish they could be so good as to qualify.
It was bizarre, and I'm still thinking from the perspective of a sexologist, where I'm like, you guys, these people are just coming in to have sex with each other.
Right.
They're the least violent people you'll ever meet. They're just worried about their genitals.
Yeah,
right?
that's all this
is. And sharing them with other people.
And really, if you think about it, you're just doing what every other hotel does, only you're doing it in one space.
Yeah.
In one space,
It's a hotel with, like, clear walls. And like, all those little adjacent doors are open. That's all this is.
Right. And what was interesting is when we had law enforcement come in, and I come from half of my family is law enforcement, so military or law enforcement. So I'm very good with law enforcement, and there's always room for improvement. But I come from that background, and when we had law enforcement come in and visit, they were under the misconception that it was going to happen in the lobby.
Oh, wow.
With the doors open to the public.
Yeah, right out there in the 120
right there.
degree
and
parking
they were
lot.
And a couple of the
food trucks.
Food trucks.
right. And so they came in, and as we were sitting there talking, they're like, well, is there any way that you could at least cover your windows? And I'm like,
What?
Wait, what?
Yeah, what are you thinking?
And they're like, well, I'm like, oh, no. It's inside where there are no windows and the doors.
Yeah.
And we're locking the building for the day.
Yeah,
and
you have to
like,
buy tickets to this. Like,
right, and they were just
it's
like,
not open to the public.
What? And I said, and all the guests have to be vetted by the organizers and are being
Right.
bussed here. They
Yeah.
can't just walk in.
Yeah.
And then the phone calls start, and this was all happening while the phones were going.
Oh my gosh.
Just ringing like crazy about people coming. How much is it to watch?
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Everybody
Right?
would say, I would like the viewing area.
Yeah. And I'm just
And then
like,
some daring people are like,
no.
I'd like to be in the splash zone, please.
Right? Yeah, like people were expecting we had auditorium seats for the orgy. It's like
Sold out like a Knights game.
Yeah.
Damn.
No, this
We had
is
to book
not
T-Mobile
the
Arena
sports
for this
arena,
thing.
you guys. This is not that kind of event.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was crazy.
Oh,
and
my
then when we
gosh.
finally had the press conference on Saturday, and at the end of the week, even the organizers were not letting us know what was going on.
Right.
They were like, look, everything's up in the air right now.
Yeah, it has to be.
And we said, okay, we'll just wait to hear from you. And then when we've had the press conference
Yeah.
on Saturday, it was an hour or two before the orgy was to start.
Wow.
They were like, it's been moved to an undisclosed location.
Yeah, and that's what I had seen online in the news. It was over the weekend. They
Yeah.
had said it's been moved to an undisclosed location. And, I thought, darn it, I wanted the EHM to be able to host it just because I want the EHM to have notoriety. I thought it would be really good for that.
I think we already do.
I think the mission was
accomplished.
Yeah, the mission was definitely accomplished.
Yeah.
And then I started thinking, you know what? I could see where that was a good pivot for them because there could have been so much unsolicited attention. It could have
Right.
become potentially dangerous.
Dangerous, right.
And so it actually is better to just go ahead and have it at an undisclosed location.
Yeah.
Ticket holders know where it is,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that's sort of it.
Right. And it was in the end I agreed with their decision because even I was starting to get a little unsettled by the attention, and I was concerned about the guest safety.
Right.
And that's what it
Right.
comes down to.
Right.
And it's a lot to take on for liability. So the orgy took place.
Right. So they let me know after because I was asked, are you still going to do the study?
Yeah.
And I said, I think so.
Yeah.
That's what I'm planning on. And afterwards, the organizer said, this is where it's been moved to.
Oh, it's exciting.
You're on the list. If you have any of your team that's coming, let us know.
Right.
And I let her know that I had one other person that was going to be doing the research with me and went over there. And unfortunately, the organizers really took on way too much. And part of that was getting the questionnaires printed, which never happened.
Yeah. That's
Right.
hard.
And I found that out when I got there, and I stayed for about 15 minutes, and the gentleman who was working on it with me, who's a professor over at UNLV, we sat in the car for a minute, and he said, well, I guess we could do observation. And I said, I don't want to without the statistics attached. It feels incomplete.
Right.
And the layout of the green door doesn't really lend itself
Right.
to what I felt was the clinical definition of an orgy.
Right.
There are several rooms there. There are several floors there. It just, at that point, it didn't fit the criteria anymore.
Yeah. What is an orgy? We've been using that word flippantly this whole time. We
Right.
should define it. Yeah.
Yeah, and there's a lot of disagreement on that. The organizers felt that an orgy was a gathering of people under one roof,
Okay.
where the sharing of genitals and the observing of sharing of genitals was the definition.
Okay.
Okay, so you didn't actually have to be having sex with someone. If you were within a few feet of someone having sex, you counted.
So we were on this podcast yesterday called Ice Cream Social. Matt
That was their-
Mattingly's Ice
that
Cream
was their
Social.
biggest question
Matt
the first-
Donnelly's big question.
Right.
Like he
What's an
zeroed
orgy?
in.
Right.
There was like unbroken eye contact with me 2 feet away, and I was like looking for where his hands were, and he was like, "How many people are in it?
Right.
And when does it count?
Right.
And like they're professional comedians, so they we were crying, we were laughing so hard
Yeah.
because they had so many different proposals for what should count and what should not. And that's actually posted. That episode's up right now if you want to check it out. But that clarifies it. So I hear you saying is they don't have to be somebody who's making physical contact with another person. You are a participant if you are
Present.
in proximity and you are observing.
Yep.
And you don't have to necessarily be nude for that.
They didn't specify.
Okay. But
Right.
you're present. You're part of the experience.
You're part of the experience
You're in the
under
cloud.
one roof.
Yeah.
Right.
Gotcha.
Got it.
For me, that didn't fit the definition that I needed to have what I thought would be a solid study.
Right. To really
Right.
do the research.
To really do the research. So I think the definition is still debatable.
Yeah.
But that's the